Hi, and welcome to a short video which I produced to answer a question on the in-thread Sonic Pi site as to how to connect the MIDI output from the MIDI X player on macOS to Sonic Pi version 3.1 running on a Mac, so that the MIDI signals this is playing can be sent to Sonic Pi and appear in the cues list here, and we can then use a little program to utilize them. At the moment, if we were to turn on the preferences in Sonic Pi and navigate to the I/O tab, you can see that there are no connected input or output devices for MIDI. There's nothing there. And so how do we get the MIDI coming from here to appear in there and also in the cues log down at the bottom? At the moment, the only option we have is to play the audio from the resulting MIDI by the built-in GM synth in this little application, and we can start that playing and hear that it does actually work and do that. So a bit of Bach playing there. I won't bore you listening to it all, but you can see that that works, and that the MIDI file Bach Staccato and Fugue, which is loaded into it, will play when we start that playing, but we can only hear it internally. So the answer to this conundrum is that we need to make use of an additional app to produce a virtual MIDI port which can be seen both by the MidiPlayer X and by Sonic Pi, and by this means we can connect the two together. So in order to do that, we need to use a utility called Audio MIDI setup, which is built into macOS. It's actually in the sub-utilities folder inside the applications folder, but the easiest way to get to it is to click on the spotlight icon, and I've already typed it in here from last time I looked at this. Just type in the word audio, and you can see that it's selected the icon for Audio MIDI setup here, and the top height is the application there, and if I double click on that, it actually opens up. And it produces a couple of windows here, 3 windows in fact we can see. The 2 main windows, there's one which is called Audio Devices and one which is called MIDI Studio. And these can be selected from the window menu at the top here. If they're not showing, you can select any one you want, and you can hide. If you shut them both down, for example, you can turn on the one you want. Well, the one we only want to use is the MIDI Studio setup, and this has 3 built-in things. You can either send MIDI over the network, or via Bluetooth, or via what's called an IAC driver. I think that stands for Inter-Application Connection Driver. And if we double click on that, because that's the one we want to use, you can see at the moment there are no virtual ports created which we can use for this. So we're going to add a port here by clicking on the plus sign, and it adds one and gives it the rather unimaginative name IAC bus 1. Well, let's change it to something a bit nicer. I'm going to double click on that to select it, and then I'm going to type SP's connect like that in there, and we're going to click on apply. Now we've created this port SP Connect in the device driver IAC driver, and if we go back to Sonic Pi now, and we go to the reset MIDI button, we can see that after a pause, and it takes a few seconds for it to repoll and see what's available, it will add that connection that we've just created. There it goes, and we can see that it's added it both for input and for output, a port called IAC _driver _SP Connect. Now Sonic Pi has actually changed the name just to make it easier to use in Sonic Pi. It always puts everything into lowercase, so you don't have to worry about capitals and lowercase, and it always replaces spaces with underscores. So it's obvious that there is one space there or one underscore there which you can see, but sometimes it's not very clear in some port strings. So we've got that port. How can we use it? Let's go back to the MidiPlayer X, which is over there, and we'll notice that if we click on this little line here that says built-in GM synth, we can see that there's another additional route added. and that root is IAC driver SP Connect. It's got the full name of the device and the port we've created under there, and if we select that, we're now changing the routing from when this file plays so that it doesn't go to the built-in synth there. Instead, it's sent to the MIDI port we've specified there, and we can see that Sonic Pi can see this port. So if we start this playing, we won't hear anything now, but we should see down here in the cues port a string of MIDI signals being received. So let's try that. There we go. Can't hear any music, but if you look down here, you can see that we've got a MIDI string, MIDI IAC driver SP Connect, then a 0, that's the port that it generates, a device port that it generates, and then channel 1, and then some note-on signals here, and we can see the data following that. So we've connected these two together, but how do we actually make use of this? Well, in order to make use of it, we have to get Sonic Pi to look at these MIDI cues which are coming in and to respond to it. And we can do this in various ways. I've written a very, very simple program which is not really all that useful, but which will let us hear the MIDI signals which are coming in. It's actually commented out at the moment, but if I was to uncomment that, let's just go through this. All we're doing is specifying a synth, use synth try, and then I've got a live loop which is going to continue going round and round. I've called it MIDI in, and it's going to sync onto a command here. Now I've actually put some asterisks in there to make it very general, but this is the way that you might set this up here. If I just delete that and come back to n, v equals sync, when I press the space bar, Sonic Pi will show all the cues that it's seen since we started. I actually put in a whole load of cue tests to remove these MIDI signals to the cues to start with, so that we could prove that they were coming in afresh when we started. And you'll see that the MIDI file has sent a control change, it's sent some note-ons, and it's sent a program change signal. We're going to ignore those to start with and just take the middle one, which is there. I'm going to click on that, and it's put it in. Excuse me. So we're going to sync to a MIDI on signal, note on signal, coming from port 0, which is IAC driver SP Connect, and channel 1. And that's going to give us two pieces of information. If you look down here at the cues coming in, you can see there are two numbers for each one. The first one is the pitch of the note which has been turned on, and the second one is the velocity factor by which this is being turned on. It's a number between 0 and 127. And if you look very carefully at this, in fact, if I just pause that for a minute, you can see that there's a note 70 being turned on with a velocity of 80 out of 127. That's about half volume. But then a short while later, it is the same note has a velocity factor of 0. That means it's so quiet you won't hear it. And that is how, in this particular case, the note will be turned off. Now, in fact, in this simple program, I'm only responding to the note on signal I'm going to ignore the ones which have got a velocity factor of 0, because you just won't hear them. So I won't ignore them, but you won't hear them. All we'll hear is that when we get one specified with a value for V, which is bigger than 0, then we will start playing that note. Now, we don't know how long to play it for, because in Sonic Pi, when you play a note, you have to specify the pitch of the note and how long you want it to last. And by default, it will last for, I think it's half a beat. I'm going to specify that the note turns off with a release time of 0.2. So we'll get a series of staccato notes. And if I start this program playing like that, it's now running and it's waiting for synchronization of the note to occur. And when I start the MIDI file playing, then we should hear something. There we go. It doesn't sound like an organ because a tri synth is not exactly an organ. but it does show that the MIDI is coming in. And so that's the demonstration that we've done.